Good morning, everyone. First, I wanted to say on behalf of House Democrats, our thoughts and prayers go out to the communities of Monterey Park and Half Moon Bay and Oakland, California, as well as Des Moines, Iowa, as well. We're 3 weeks into 2023, and there have been 2,800 deaths from gun violence. We join President Biden and Vice President Harris in calling for continued gun safety legislation and stand ready to build safer communities by expanding the gun safety legislation and building upon the legislative successes that we had in that regard, and look forward to continued efforts to do that. My colleagues behind me and I joined in welcoming the Vice President of the United States to address our caucus. She not only talked about advancing reproductive freedom, building off of her speech this weekend and the 50th anniversary of Roe v. Wade. She delivered powerful remarks also supporting House Democrats in our efforts to build upon the success that we have had in the last 2 years, and talking about the implementation plans that the administration has in order to make sure we deliver on our promise to help our communities, to lower costs, to create good paying jobs, and to make sure that they are safer. Joined today not only by the Vice Chair, but Representatives Yadira Caraveo, Sidney Kamlager-Dove, and Hillary Skolton, who will talk about the unique and personal stories to demonstrate the ways that abortion touches the lives of so many women across our country. Before I yield to the Vice Chair, I did want to mention some of the latest that we have seen on the prioritization plan that Republicans might put forward in order to address the debt ceiling. This is a plan that would pay foreign investors and enact cuts to Social Security and Medicare, school lunches, law enforcement who aid in investigations across this country, as well as potentially the FAA that manages 25,000 flights per day. Republicans in Congress want to hold hostage veterans benefits to enact deep Social Security and Medicare cuts. If you don't trust me, just read their own words on this topic. What's worse is that this plan just won't work. We're going to continue to highlight the economic catastrophe that could come from their proposed plans, and Democrats will oppose them at each and every step that they want to enact these deep cuts. With that, I'll yield to the Vice Chair, Ted Lieu.
Thank you, Chairman Aguilar, for your leadership. And in line with what the chairman said, I also want to offer my condolences to the victims and families of the tragic mass shootings in Monterey Park, in Half Moon Bay, in Des Moines, and in Oakland. And what it shows is that the Republicans' extreme view that more guns make us safer is false. It has not borne out. It is a failed policy approach. It's time to try another approach. Republicans have also been extreme when it comes to our economy. They want to hold it hostage in order to extract cuts to Social Security and Medicare. They want to try to crash our economy in order to make those cuts, and Democrats are not going to let that happen. Republicans are also extreme when it comes to reproductive rights. One of the first bills they did when they took power was to criminalize healthcare providers. There was an interesting article that appeared in the New York Times not too long ago. It had a picture of an abortion at about 6 weeks. Most abortions happen at less than 9 weeks. So it was a picture of a clump of cells. Now, is that a human being? I don't know. But I do know that politicians should not be making that decision. That decision should be made by the woman. And the Republicans' extreme view is that we all should have government-mandated pregnancies. Democrats are going to stop that. And it is now my honor and pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Yadira Caraveo, who will talk a little bit more about reproductive rights.
Well, thank you, Vice Chair Liu and Chairman Aguilar, for hosting us this week as we recognize what would have been the 50th anniversary of Roe v. Wade. Today, I stand before you as a member of Congress, but before I was elected to this seat, I spent my life serving my community in Colorado as a doctor. I'm honored to have stood by my patients during some of their happiest moments in their lives and some of the hardest moments too, from first steps and first words to vaccines and overcoming tough diagnoses. And yes, I have stood shoulder to shoulder with young women as they face the solemn decision of whether to have an abortion. Having stood in that room, I can tell you this is a decision that is never made lightly. It is one of the biggest and most difficult life-changing decisions a woman can make. That is why I believe firmly that it is a decision that must remain in the exam room between a woman and her doctor and the people closest to her, not on the floor of the House of Representatives. Last Sunday would have marked the 50th anniversary of Roe v. Wade, the case that protected every woman's right to make decisions about her own body. But this is the first anniversary in 50 years that women no longer have those protections. Today, it is more important than ever that we reinstate the rights that were afforded by Roe, because women across the country deserve the right over their own bodies, the choice about when or if to have a family, to control their own livelihood, and the basic assurance that they are protected equally, just as men are with the laws in this country. As the most extreme members among us push for a federal abortion ban and attempt to criminalize doctors who have cared for their patients, it is more important than ever that we stand strong on behalf of all women. As a doctor, as a member of Congress, as a woman, and as an American, I will fight every single day for these protections. It's a priority of mine. I know I stand in good company with all of the members on this stage and in our caucus, and we fight as we will continue to fight for every woman's right to make her own healthcare decisions. So thank you very much, and I would love to turn it over now to my colleague, Congresswoman Sydney Comlager-Dove from California.
Thank you. And I just want to start by saying, as a Californian, I too want to extend my prayers to the victims of the mass shootings in Monterey Park, Half Moon Bay, Oakland, and Des Moines, Iowa. It is no doubt that the pro-choice movement was dealt a massive blow last June. This conservative activist Supreme Court overturned decades of precedent. They stripped away Americans' freedom to make their own healthcare decisions, specifically a woman's right to make choices about her own body and a doctor's right to provide her care. And as a result, they are putting all of our lives at risk. Republicans across the country are trying to bring us back to the days of back alley coat hanger abortions with deadly consequences. Women are being forced to travel hundreds of miles, leaving their children behind, risking their jobs, all to have access to basic health care. This harms the women who are most at risk of having less access to health care in the first place: poor women, Black and brown women, women in rural communities. But we will not allow them to drag us back to the 1970s. This movement has always been bigger than Roe. We saw it in red state Kansas, where voters shocked the nation by coming out to protect abortion access in their state. We saw it again in November, where voters across the country stood up and showed out for abortion rights. Voters said, women matter, healthcare matters, freedom matters, abortion matters. And even still, extreme Republicans have been itching to enact a nationwide abortion ban. Extreme Republicans have already proposed one. They want to control women, take away our freedoms, and limit our bodily autonomy. To them, The Handmaid's Tale isn't a horror, it's a fantasy. But this movement is the woman king, and we are not going without a fight. We will not let the Republican Party erode the rights of women across the country and turn out the light of democracy. I am here to say, as a proud member of the Board of Directors for Planned Parenthood Los Angeles, that women have the right to control their own personal decision-making. Women have the right to fully control our bodies, lives, families, and futures. And we have a responsibility to put an end to politicians inserting themselves into doctors' offices and the uteruses of women throughout the country. I will now yield to Representative Skolton. One day, a few years ago, on a day not too different from this one, my husband and I received some of the most devastating news expected parents can receive. Our hoped-for first child, our daughter, had received a terminal diagnosis, Turner syndrome, was considered incompatible with life. I remember so much about that day, the look on our doctor's face, the phone call to our pastor. But what I remember most distinctly was the absence of government intervention and the freedom my husband and I had to make the choice that was best for us. After much prayer and consideration and with eyes wide open, we chose to give our daughter every chance at life we possibly could. So much made that choice possible. The knowledge that we could, with the love and support of our family and faith community, our good health insurance, flexible, good paying jobs, we could support a child with even severe disabilities. And the knowledge that if we ever got to the point where my health or life was threatened, or the pain for our daughter would be too much, that we could choose to terminate the pregnancy. We had so much freedom to make the choice we wanted. For us, that choice was life. This week, we're marking 50 years since Roe versus Wade gave women the critical reproductive right to seek an abortion. But today, we live in a country where women have less freedom and fewer rights than half a century ago. Last week, Republicans launched the 118th Congress with a regressive anti-family bill that undermined parental rights and was not intended to actually pass into law, but rather divide the American people and pit us against each other over an issue where, in fact, we actually share a lot of common ground. As a pro-choice Christian, I deeply honor the sanctity of life, and I'm ready to work with Republicans and Democrats on legislation that will give women more choices and flexibility when faced with unexpected pregnancy situations. Studies continue to demonstrate that criminalizing women and doctors outlawing abortions does not actually lead to reduced abortions. If Republicans had really been interested in honoring the sanctity of life, including the life of the mother and children born into less than ideal circumstances, they could have introduced legislation to ensure access to affordable health care, expand the child tax credit, or increase educational opportunities for parents and children. But they did not. They could have supported working families by raising the minimum wage or helped address housing instability. But they did not. They could have introduced any number of pieces of legislation that would actually support parents and give them more options when bringing a child into this world. But they did not. I'm here to talk about solutions. It's why the people of West Michigan sent me here. I invite my Republican colleagues to join us in coming together to truly honor the sanctity of life by supporting families facing hard times and difficult choices. I'm ready to get to work. Thank you. I yield back to the chair.
Thank you, Hillary, Sydney, and Yadira for sharing those words. Questions? In the back.
This one's actually for Congressman Liu. You wrote an op-ed recently on AI and regulating AI and the potential dangers of it. Just wondering your thoughts on what Congress can do with the technology that's growing this quickly, and then additionally, if there's room for bipartisan agreement on it, and this is something Republicans and Democrats look like they can work together on.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. I do believe this is a bipartisan issue. You have artificial intelligence, which has done amazing things for our society, but if it's left unregulated and unchecked, it can cause harm. We've already seen some of the harms it caused. We had a Tesla car simply stop in a tunnel in San Francisco that then resulted in a multi-car accident where 9 people were injured. You have this new program now called ChatGPT, which is free on the internet, and it will write essays for you. It will do all sorts of things. It makes it very hard for teachers and professors to now figure out if a student wrote it or if a computer program did. And you have all sorts of harms in the future that we don't even know about. And so I think Congress should step up and start looking at ways to regulate artificial intelligence. It's really hard to go from zero right now, virtually no regulation, to, for example, a federal agency. So you have to take steps in between. I think one step is to have a commission that looks at these very hard issues and makes recommendations to Congress as the best way to regulate AI.
Can I just follow up on the AI question for just a moment? You know, we've seen Congress struggle to regulate crypto. We've seen struggles with, say, Section 230. It's a divided Congress. Might be hard to get things done this year. I mean, doesn't Congress, you say you can't just start you have to start at zero. It's hard to kind of speed up, but because of the history of Congress being behind the curve on some of these tech issues, why would this not fall into that abyss as well?
It absolutely is going to be immensely difficult to regulate artificial intelligence. It is, first of all, a subject that's not well understood, even by experts. But you know what else is a subject not well understood? How molecules interact with hundreds of millions of unique human beings. And yet we stood up an entire FDA to regulate pharmaceutical drugs. So it can be done. You just have to take steps to get there. And I think it's something we have to start pursuing because technology and artificial intelligence is accelerating at a rate much faster than I think we can even comprehend at this point.
2 AI questions to start. I mean, that wasn't on my bingo card. It wasn't on my bingo card. Lisa?
What may I write?
Lisa? Go.
Thank you. On the topic of abortion, 2 weeks ago, the House passed a concurrent resolution condemning attacks on, with the resolution described as pro-life activists and facilities. Most every Democrat voted against that, including all of you on the stage. Can you just tell us why you voted against that? Something that Majority Leader Scalise today brought out as an example of Democrats being unreasonable. Tell us why you voted against it.
Look, we oppose all violence. Specific to that, resolution, we felt that it was important for us to send the message that so many of these, facilities aren't what they are billed as, and we wanted to be very clear that when Republicans advance proposals and policies, senses of Congress that are just political and don't have anything to do with true issues, that members are free to vote however they want. All of us shared that opinion, but and voted opposed to this. But I think it's important what my colleagues had mentioned, and I'm going to yield to them, is that the first 3 bills that Republicans advanced were attacking women's reproductive freedom. That's who Kevin McCarthy has enabled. He had to make all of these promises to attack women's rights in order to secure the votes for the speakership. It's an unfortunate state of play is where we are, but it highlights the extreme nature of where House Republicans are within their agenda. I'll yield to Sydney Kalmager if she wants to.
Yeah, I would just say that was a Republican, gotcha and red herring. We should be opposing violence across the board. I come from a state where not only patients have been attacked, but also providers that are providing abortion care are being attacked daily. And so that wasn't in that resolution language. And if you are going to call out violence, you should call it out across the board. This is not about pitting women against one another. This is about standing up for what's right, and that's protecting a woman's right to choose and her right to access abortion care.
Hillary Scholten.
The resolution only went halfway. It only condemned violence on one side of the aisle. When I read the resolution, I was inclined to condemn violence. We condemn all forms of violence. But instead, what we did was got together and introduced a counter resolution that condemned violence across the board, including against pregnancy resources, but also abortion clinics, which received substantially more times the violence than these pregnancy resource centers or churches do. We take the violence seriously. I've certainly been subject to a lot of heated harassment as well for my stance as a pro-choice Christian. It's a heated area, and we have to lower the temperature on this issue, but we're not going to do it by only condemning violence on one side and additionally using a lot of inflammatory rhetoric that was used in this resolution. That's not the way forward. Thank you.
Let me tell you why I voted no on the resolution, because at the heart of that resolution was a lie. If you read the resolution, it goes through all these instances of condemning violence, which I support, and then it says the Biden administration is at fault for not taking action in those violent incidents. That is just a lie. The whole point of this resolution was to blame the Biden administration for these acts of violence. That is a lie. It is false. That is why I voted against it, and the Republicans should be ashamed for putting that lie into that resolution.
Here. How does the caucus respond to the speaker kicking two of your fellow Californians off the Intel committee, and what's your sense of where things stand on Ilhan Omar getting to keep her seat on foreign affairs?
I think it's ridiculous that the speaker would kick two good members who know a lot about the intelligence world off of the committee, while at the same time seating George Santos and giving him 2 committee assignments. I think it's ridiculous, and the caucus feels that way. These are members that were advanced by the Democratic Caucus and our leader to serve in this capacity and have served. And it's unfortunate that, but it is the speaker's prerogative, just like it's his prerogative to seat George Santos on 2 committees in Congress, while we are completely uncertain as to what aspects of his life he's ever told the truth on. With respect to Ilhan Omar, I would note when Democrats took action, it was bipartisan action to remove members who had made threats to their colleagues. It would take a vote and a resolution for that to happen, and the Democratic Caucus stands with Representative Omar that she should serve on this committee, and we'll see how Republicans want to handle this.
You're confident you'd have 100% of the caucus in support of her?
The Democratic Caucus is supportive of her serving in this capacity. She has the background and breadth and experience to serve on this committee, and she should be able to. And clearly it's going to be, based on the letter I read, it's going to be a bipartisan vote to keep her on the committee.
Are you frustrated with President Biden's handling of classified documents?
I'm frustrated that if anyone doesn't handle confidential and secret documents in the manner in which they're supposed to. All of us up here, we have security clearances, and when we handle things, I'm a defense appropriator. I go to the secure facility and read documents often. There's a process by which we are allowed to do that. There's a process by which we leave devices and view that material in a safe and secure environment, and then leave. It's clear that some protocols weren't followed. I think based on what we know, the current president, President Biden, and Vice President Pence have handled this the way that they should, in letting everyone know and talking to the archives and law enforcement agencies as to what was found. It's clear that the former president didn't handle this appropriately and has obstructed every possible avenue in which authorities could view that material and lied about the material that he had in his possession. So I do view them differently, but I think altogether it's disappointing that this keeps happening. Next question, in the back. Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. So on the debt limit, you said that that Democrats will oppose each and every step to enact deep cuts. Are you open to discussing any cuts?
There's a process for this. Thank you for teaming me up to put my appropriator hat on. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I'm a House appropriator, and I stand, ready to work with my colleagues in that committee to look at what our top line number is for spending, and then devising 12 appropriations bills that spend up to that number. We're going to have disagreements. We always do in that committee. But we're going to have substantive dialogue. We're going to have hearings within each committee. We're going to talk to the agencies. We're going to talk to outside experts. We're going to find out how we can use taxpayer dollars efficiently and effectively for the American public. But that's a conversation that can be had within the budget committees, within the appropriations committees. That's how this should be addressed. This should not be addressed through the extreme way that House Republicans want to do it, which is by making promises to the most extreme of their caucus and to cut defense, to cut benefits to veterans, to cut Social Security and Medicare. Those are the types of promises they made to get to this position, and we won't stand for that.
Some of your colleagues in the Senate have talked about a bipartisan push for immigration reform, and I'm just curious if you guys have had any discussion in caucus around what you'd like to see in any immigration packages that could be put forward this Congress.
This is something that's important for the Democratic Caucus. It's something that I've spent a lot of time, on as well. We advanced so many important pieces of legislation that didn't go anywhere in the Senate, unfortunately. And I think about two strong bipartisan efforts, and I hope that we can continue the conversation in that regard to the Dream and Promise Act, right? Having a path to citizenship for Dreamers. And DACA recipients, as well as addressing the temporary protected status that so many have in our communities, as well as the Farm Worker Modernization Bill, done in a bipartisan way in the House. Both of those bills passed the last Congress in a bipartisan way. That's where we should start the conversation. Our goal, our aspirations are always going to be comprehensive immigration reform, and I stand ready and willing to work with the administration and with some of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, if that's their true intention. But we're not going to support policies that enact a medieval border wall or dramatically gut our asylum process that is been in existence for decades. Those are things that we aren't going to entertain, but if people want to have real solutions on the table, we're willing to engage and have conversations.
Last question. Just on the debt ceiling, just to follow up on for questions. Are you supporting the president? He will not negotiate a grand budget bargain with Republicans related to debt ceiling. Are you supporting that? No negotiations on that?
We're not going to negotiate the full faith and credit of and compromise the full faith and credit of the United States. That is not what we're going to do. If Republicans want to have conversations about our federal spending levels within the budget and appropriations committees and contexts, we're happy to have those conversations, as we have time and time again. But if they want to enact broad and deep cuts to Medicare and Social Security, and that's their starting point, then that's not anything we're going to entertain. We're united behind protecting those programs. We're united behind ensuring that veterans receive the benefits that they have earned. I'll yield to the Vice Chair.
It's very clear that Republicans want to cut Social Security. They've been trying to do this since President Bush tried to privatize Social Security, and they want to hold our economy hostage in order to do that. At the same time, they haven't even presented a plan. So show us your plan. We would like to see Republicans show, because it's in the show, cutting Social Security plus a bunch of other things. And perhaps the analogy is the best way to think about this. So for your family in America, if you have a debt on your car and you make monthly loan payments to your car, you don't get to just stop making those loan payments and say, hey, let's talk about a future car and what kind of deal I can get on it. Because what happens when you stop making your loan payments on your car gets repossessed. Bad things happen. So don't let Republicans do bad things to our economy.
The last point I'd say, Eric, is I think it's 78 times that the debt limit has been raised, 49 when Republicans were in charge, 3 when President Trump was an occupant of the Oval Office. It feels like Republicans only want to have these extreme discussions when a Democrat is occupying the White House, and that doesn't seem fair. Doesn't seem right for the American public that they want to assault Social Security and Medicare as a result of their negotiating posture within this and the votes that they needed in order for Kevin McCarthy to be Speaker. Thank you so much.
Thank you.